Oh, that's a hell of an introduction. Well, good morning, everybody. Now you're going to say he's really gone off the deep end. But I'm going to do something that I have never done. And anybody that is interested in listening to this, I'd be more than happy to tell this story. And this is how it started. I was going around the campus and I visit the different dorms and I talk to people and see what maybe I'd want to put in my next column. And and I come across this kid, and there was a group of us talking, and they knew that sometimes I wrote side stories, short stories on the side, and this kid's name was Chips, and he said, "I bet you can't write a story about me." So I said, "Well, as long as you don't mind fiction, I'll give it a try," and I went back to a dorm room with a typewriter, and this is what I come up with, and I gave him a copy the next morning, and this is copyrighted material. It wasn't copyrighted till '93, but it was written in 1969. And remind you that the kid's name was Chips. Okay, so it's called The Sensuous Pig. Now, you might be better off if you just have a drink and listen to this because it's going to be boring otherwise. I'm just going to read it. Okay, my name is Chips. I'm a sensuous pig. Lost in the center of every great university, and many of those not so great, are the lustful, the hardcore pleasure seekers who would rather titillate their pleasure centers than entertain their intellects. They are the ones that get off better on a great-looking body than on the finest Berkeley acid or Jamaican rum, although they are willing to employ either to achieve their goals. Their life rotates around the more sensuous organs of the human anatomy. They engage in acts of which the more inhibited members of less than lustful society would only dream, much less participate in. I'm also a member of that society, yet find the sensuous life justifiable. Chips is my name, and stimulation is my game. It's very simple. There are few rules, and perhaps that is why many do not play, because it lacks the discipline of this ordered life. But it's a nice game. The one rule is simply you find another thing or being that can stimulate your pleasure center to overproduction, and you employ it by any means necessary. It's a game in which I have become most proficient. Being a sensuous pig, I find that such a game as this, not as encumbering as war or as involved as love, it's nevertheless a game worthy of such a player as myself. I don't know that I invented the game, but I have played it well for a good many years. Early in my teenage career, I found that certain portions of my anatomy were more sensitive than others. Once this discovery was made, it took me little time to discover that I could stimulate these portions of my body and produce a state of pleasure that I had previously not known. Wasn't long after that that I discovered that there are others that could arouse my sensitivities with equal fecundity. Memory strikes a little blow, and I can't recall if it was a chick I met in church that first so demonstrated her ability to so titillate my organs as to produce a flowering of body fluids, or my scoutmaster whose every move brought my body a sense of being wanted. It really doesn't matter. They both became regulars at the watering hole, as my excitement was only paralleled by their own. Eventually the scouts left much to be desired, and the chick wasn't as tight as she once had been. But the stage was set, and my senses asked for more and more stimulating experiences. I set about searching for the total orgasm. Youth has a way of putting things off, and I found only in reflection that I could have had a more sensuous life. That is, had I known the desires of those not so youthful as I had been. But I did manage to set aside many of the mores of the social class, and in so doing found life to be so much more rewarding than that of my peers. As I made my way through my peers and freaked out many a body and mind, I found that what I wanted from life and what I was getting were pretty much in conflict with what I was told I should want and do, thus leaving me with only one option. Not wanting to be a hypocrite, I gave up the church and relinquished society's right to dictate against my pleasures through controlling my actions. It was a good compromise that society and myself reached. They wouldn't fuck over my sensitivities, and I wouldn't destroy their institutions. I thought, let the poor bastards believe in their gods and moral system. All I desired was to be left with the wit to convince those of beauty and passion that both of those resources could be employed to the fullest within or without the system. You see, I didn't want to stop their machine. All I wanted to do was borrow a part now and then to maintain my own consumptive orgasms. Life was full of joys, and I entertained every variety of orgasm that those of more experience could induce and that I could undertake without endangering my future physical career. My early youth passed in less than a flurry of excitement, but I had at least broken into the ecstatic states of sensuous delight. I eagerly looked forward to receive additions to my already rapidly expanding repertoire of sensuous fantasies and experiences. Now, the sensuous life is not all fucking suck. It's not all the lust and passion for the ultimate climax, the total orgasm. No, it's not all titillation of the penis and other sensitive areas of the anatomy. But it's so far ahead of the other experiences that I will just have to entertain them in another work. As I entered into my physical, mature years of my youth, I found the vivid imagination matched with proper garb would net me the serious delight that I set out to consume or be consumed by. It was an exciting time, and all that was youthful about my physique was well displayed and publicized. Life became one succession after another of orgasmic pleasure. And I had found that such life could not merely be fun, but also profitable. I became a hustler and a gigolo, and found it a toss-up as to which required the least effort on my part and the greatest pleasurable return. Hustling brought in the most income, and I was able to bank a few dollars away for a season in which my organ no longer would salute on command. It was from time to time the good life, but what a future! I thought I could certainly entertain the life I had been for another 10 years, but then what? The way the world was rotating off center, I could care less about 10 years. Yet for some reason, I entered a period of contemplation for days. I found myself questioning the notion that the whole world was not really a whore. But as great thoughts often find themselves doing, I easily managed to justify my existence and celebrated with such a rendition of sexual delights that I have flashbacks to my first orgasm as memory recalled this less than mature young bosom and hole so tight that I thought it was indeed responsible for my circumcision. Memory does work. All that is needed is reason sufficient to entertain old experiences. But thoughts are never as great as the experience. Knowing this, I launched myself into the future and flashed ahead. It is so much more rewarding a dream, all those yet untouched bodies to know. Rather than mere memoirs, I would have plenty of time for those, but before the time arose, I wanted to make so many additions to that ever expanding repertoire that I reached a state of reflection I would make each view into the past so vivid that every flashback would be no less than Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights. It was with this in mind that I undertook my college career. As I entered the first class, I received some rather strange views from my economics professor, and that very same day my English professor entertained me with a hairy eyeball. Before the first week was out, I had gone through sensations that would not merely bring on a rise of my life, but also guarantee that my cum would be sufficient for me to continue down the road of delights at this fine southern campus. But campus was like an oasis in a desert of Puritanism. There were rednecks to the right and on all flanks of the college. One step off the oasis, and you were consumed by the straight world. What a drag. I managed to conceal myself in the underground world of the lustful, while at the same time engaging in an ever increasing repertoire of sensations and finding out that the more you use your tool, the better you get at its use. What a wonderful thing, I thought. Here is a resource that increases with use. There aren't many of those around, and one is discovered, it should be used to the fullest. Only thing being that it never reaches such a state. Terrific. Life was coming by the bushel, and I managed to chip off my peck's worth every day. It was what I dreamed of, but what gestalt of orgasm was still off in the future. But that gestalt. I passed through my freshman year, still slightly naive, but how great a garden of earthly delights it was. But I was fastly becoming a farmer whose tool could hoe itself through a garden of virgins without having to be resharpened. It was honed steel whose edge got sharper with use and whose mass became increasingly harder as it separated the weeds from the useful crops. I guess that was during this time that I discovered one's tongue to be an instrument of unsurpassed talents. Part 1.